The female is, as it were, a mutilated male. Aristotle. They told you women were divine, that their hearts were made of warmth and healing, that they loved deeper, purer, softer, that they were the answer to your chaos, the balm to your ache. And you believed it because everyone did, because from the first stories you heard as a boy, she was the prize, the angel, the mother, the muse, and you, what were you? The chaser, the protector, the fool on his knees offering himself in exchange for closeness. But what if that idea, that myth you were raised on, was not just false, but designed to blind you? What if women are not angels? What if the woman you love is not a mirror of your missing piece, but a mirror of your misunderstanding? Aristotle didn't romanticize it. He didn't wrap womanhood in poetry. He looked at nature with no filter, no myth, no mercy, and what he saw shook the foundation of the fairy tale. He said it clearly, not out of hate, but as a cold observation of form and function, a biological truth, not a moral one, a nature he believed doesn't lie. Now hold on, this isn't about biology anymore. This is about what that truth does to the illusions you hold. But what if love in its rawest state is not mutual at all? What if it's hierarchy dressed up as devotion? What if, when you say you're in love, you're just kneeling at the altar of your own idealization? You don't see her. You see the part of yourself that wants to be healed, and she sees the part of you that wants to believe. You think she's nurturing, maybe, or maybe she's mirroring what you crave, because she knows that craving gives her control. You think she's soft. Look closer. That softness is performance, not always manipulative, sometimes unconscious, but performance nonetheless. Because if Aristotle was right, then everything she does, everything she is shaped around what you want her to be. Not because she's weak, not because she's dishonest, but because nature made her that way. Adaptive, strategic, emotionally fluid, a shapeshifter, because when you are not the center, when you are not the default, you learn to survive by bending to the dominant form. And in a man's world, women bend not out of love, but out of necessity. So now ask yourself, when you look at her, what are you really seeing? A person or a projection, a partner or a placeholder for your unresolved hunger. You don't want a woman. You want the idea of her, and she knows that that's her power. She doesn't need to dominate you. She just needs to reflect you. And once she does, once she becomes the echo chamber for your emotional fantasy, you fall. You surrender, not because she is powerful, but because you gave her that power, not because she's divine, but because you're lost. And once you've surrendered, once you've handed over your identity in exchange for that reflection, what remains of you? You think you're loving, you think you're giving, but really you're bargaining. You're offering your masculinity at the altar of approval, hoping she'll look at you and say you're enough. But what if she never meant to say that? What if she doesn't even see you? Only the version of you she can shape. And here's what no one dares to say out loud: she's not looking for truth. She's looking for advantage, not out of cruelty, out of design. While you speak in vulnerability, she listens in strategy. While you offer your past like a confession, she listens for patterns, leverage, openings, not because she's evil. She is not the origin. She is the response, the echo, the adjustment. You think that makes her less. It doesn't, because when someone doesn't have power and structure, they master power and subtlety. You call her emotional, but really she's surgical. You think she's feeling, but she's scanning every smile, every silence, every slight movement from you. She registers it like code. She had to master one thing: how to become indispensable to the very man who unknowingly fears her difference. And that's what you don't see, that your love isn't love, it's dependency, and her love, it's not care, it's calibration. She doesn't need to overpower you, she just needs to become essential. The voice you hear in your head before you make a decision, the comfort you crave after you fall, the approval you chase like oxygen, and you call that romance. That's obedience wrapped in poetry. But don't blame her. She didn't create this game. She learned it. She mastered it because when men were building systems, women were building survival. You conquered the outer world with war and steel. She conquered the inner world with softness and suggestion, not because she was weak, but because she was watching, learning, adapting. She doesn't want to dominate your body. She wants to occupy your mind, and she does. She lives in your hunger. She lives in your guilt. She lives in your need to be wanted. That's not love. That's control. So refined, you call it chemistry. So invisible, you call it fate. But fate doesn't track your flaws. She does. She remembers what makes you feel small. She remembers how you talk when you're unsure. She learns your rhythm, your volume, your vocabulary, because every detail you offer is another doorway into your self-worth. You thought she was fragile. She's not. She's a tactician. You thought she needed protection. She doesn't. She needed proximity. You thought she was waiting for you. She was watching you. Watching how much of yourself you're willing to give away in exchange for the idea of being loved. And once she sees that weakness, you are no longer a man in her eyes. You are a resource, a means not to hurt you, but to center herself. And that means she doesn't move toward you. She moves around you. She flows. She adapts. She doesn't demand power. She becomes the thing power needs. That's not love. That's evolution, and evolution doesn't care about your feelings. So here you are, worshiping softness, kneeling before strategy, and still wondering why you feel so hollow, why you give and still feel unseen. It's because you're not loving a woman. You're loving the story you wrote about her, and the tragedy is she knows it. She knows it, and she plays it because the story benefits her more than the truth ever could. Why would she correct your illusion when it hands her influence without confrontation? Why would she dismantle the pedestal you built when that pedestal lets her rule without being seen as a ruler? You call her mystery, you call her feminine. You say she's hard to understand, but there's nothing mysterious about it. You just don't want to see the clarity hiding behind the comfort she is not hiding. You're just refusing to look. Because the moment you admit that her kindness might be calculation, that her tenderness might be a tool, that her affection might be a mirror not of your worth but of her will, you'll have to admit something else, that the version of you she reflects is a lie. You needed more than you ever needed love. She doesn't need to deceive you with words. You've already deceived yourself with meaning. She simply adapts to the role you cast her in. And when she no longer needs you, when the utility ends, when your usefulness expires, the role ends too. And then you say she changed, that she stopped loving you, that she grew cold. But maybe she didn't change. Maybe she just stopped pretending. Maybe she just stopped feeding the version of herself that kept you emotionally obedient. And here you are, confused, broken, not because she left, but because your reflection left with her. You didn't lose love. You lost the part of yourself that only existed through her approval, and now you're empty because you were never whole to begin with. You were a man stitched together by the attention of a woman who knew exactly how to give just enough to keep you chasing and just little enough to keep you insecure. That's not her fault. That's yours because you built your self-worth around her gaze, and when she stopped looking, your identity collapsed. Aristotle wasn't trying to attack women, he was describing nature. But you can't stand that kind of clarity. You'd rather be seduced than confronted. You'd rather be needed than be real. You'd rather be loved through illusion than seen through truth. But she sees. She always saw. She saw how badly you needed her to be perfect, how desperately you wanted to be enough. And she used it not maliciously but instinctively. Because when you're the imperfect man, as Aristotle would say, when your form is reaction, not creation, your strength becomes the mastery of perception. You must learn how to manipulate attention, how to provoke emotion, how to center yourself through his vulnerability. And when you do it well, he won't even notice. He'll call it fate. He'll call it magic. He'll call it love. But it's not magic, it's measurement. She is not mysterious. She's meticulous. Every pause, every tear, every gesture, it's not random, it's deliberate. She's not emotionally lost. She's emotionally literate. She knows the grammar of your heart better than you do, and she edits you silently, strategically, until you're speaking her script without realizing you forgot your own. And this is where men break. This is where the illusion becomes unbearable. Because at some point the crack starts showing, the pedestal begins to wobble. You start noticing that she doesn't admire you. She manages you, that she doesn't uplift you. She rearranges you. And when you resist, when you reclaim, when you say no, she pulls back, not because she's hurt, but because control has slipped. And without control, there is no leverage. And without leverage, there is no intimacy, because in her world, intimacy is not connection, it's choreography, and you've been dancing to her rhythm without even knowing the music was hers. You danced because it felt like love, because it felt familiar, because the myth of her grace wrapped itself around your loneliness like silk around skin. But it wasn't grace, it was gravity. You didn't fall in love. You fell into orbit around her, moods around her needs, around her silence, around her reactions. And you thought that meant closeness, but closeness without clarity is just captivity, and you've been captive so long you've mistaken the cage for connection. You used to have edges, opinions, direction. But now you find yourself hesitating, censoring, folding yourself into versions that won't upset her. You say it's because you love her. But real love doesn't ask for self-erasure. Real love doesn't punish authenticity. And if the cost of her affection is your voice, your will, your spine, then what you have is not a relationship, it's a rehearsal for obedience. And still you defend her, still you tell yourself she's just misunderstood, that she's complicated, that she's been hurt. But maybe the real truth, the one that burns quietly beneath your rationalizations, is that she's not confused at all. She's clear, crystal clear. She knows what she's doing, she knows what she wants, and she knows exactly what part of you she has to touch to get it. You think she's emotionally raw, she's emotionally precise. You think she's overwhelmed. She's calculating every outburst, every breakdown, every retreat. Those aren't weaknesses, they're tools, because in a system where the male is power and the female is deviation, the only way to win is to make him hand over his power willingly. And you did. You gave it up like a gift, thinking it made you noble, but it didn't. It made you predictable. Predictable. Men are easy to break. So when she pushes your buttons, it's not by accident. She's been mapping those buttons since day one. Every compliment, a probe, every I love how honest you are, a calibration. She doesn't want your soul. She wants your pattern, because once she knows it, she owns it. And the moment she owns it, she owns you and you. You call that intimacy, but that's not intimacy. That's influence masquerading as love. And here's the deepest betrayal, the one you won't speak of, the part of you that knows she doesn't admire you, that behind her eyes she's not looking at a man, she's looking at a project. that your strength isn't admired, it's tolerated, that your vulnerability isn't honored. It's archived, stored for later, for when it's useful. You think she's nurturing your wounds, but really she's memorizing them, because whoever knows where it hurts controls when it hurts. And so you stay silent because speaking up would mean destroying the fantasy. Because the only thing scarier than losing her is realizing she was never yours to begin with, that you were hers. That the pedestal was never a tribute, it was a stage, and you were performing the whole time. Aristotle didn't write that women are malicious, the realization that you've never really seen her. Only her reflection in your desire, only the version she performed, the version that matched your wounds. And now that the performance is over, now that the illusion is cracking, you're not grieving her. You're grieving the man you pretended to be in her presence, but he was never real. He was never whole. He was the mask you wore to win a woman who never showed you her real face. And now the mask is gone, her performance is over. The illusion has collapsed and you're standing in the ruins, not of love, but of your own delusion. The dream that a woman could complete you, that her affection could redeem you, that her presence could define your worth. It's all gone, and you feel the panic, the emptiness, the weight of your own identity staring back without the filters of fantasy. But this is not the end. This is the beginning, because now finally you're forced to ask the question you've spent your whole life avoiding. Who are you without her? Without the emotional training wheels, without the praise, without the role you played to feel valuable? What remains? And if the answer is silence, then that silence is your truth. That silence is your foundation. That silence is the first honest thing you felt in years you were taught to be the hero in a story written by someone else. But what if there is no story? What if the woman was never your salvation but your mirror, not to reflect your strength but to expose your fear? Because the truth is you never loved her, not really. You loved the feeling of being chosen. You loved the escape from your own chaos. You loved the comfort of outsourcing your purpose to her validation. And now that she's gone, you're not broken, you're exposed. You say she used you, but what did you use her for? You made her your meaning. You made her your morality. You made her your emotional oxygen. You didn't want partnership, you wanted permission. Permission to feel worthy, permission to feel needed, permission to avoid doing the inner work that terrifies you more than heartbreak ever could. But she never signed up to be your redeemer. She simply walked into the role you cast for her and played it well. And now, Aristotle's words ring louder than ever. Women are not monsters, not saints, not goddesses, just mirrors, warped by biology and shaped by survival, not broken but built differently, designed not to lead but to adapt. And when you refuse to see that, when you ignore her nature, you become her victim, not her partner. But here's the moment of power, the moment of awakening. When you stop seeing women as solutions, you start seeing yourself as one. When you stop chasing reflections, you start building reality, and the man who builds himself no longer fears the absence of her gaze. He doesn't crumble when she withholds, he doesn't fall when she pulls back, because he is no longer performing. He is present. He is sovereign, and she can feel that, and she will test that. Because the moment you stop orbiting, the gravity shifts, the roles reverse, the myth dies, and in its place something raw begins, not romance, not passion, but truth. She may not like it, she may leave, she may try to reframe you into the man who once kneeled. But if you stay firm, if you hold your center, something changes. You no longer need her to be pure. You no longer need her to be soft. You no longer need her to be anything but real. And in that space stripped of illusion, something radical is possible. Connection without control, love without leverage, intimacy without dependency. But only if you're willing to let the myth burn. So let it burn. Let the fantasy collapse. Let the pedestal crack. Let the false stories drown in their own sentimentality and stand alone, honest, unedited, face the woman. Not as a rescuer or a villain, but as a reflection of nature's difference. Not lesser, not greater, just different. Because only when you no longer need her to complete you will you ever be capable of truly meeting her. If this shattered an illusion or opened your eyes, don't keep it to yourself. Like the video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more raw, unapologetic truths they won't teach you anywhere else. And if you want to support this work, the channel link is in the description. Every contribution keeps the truth alive.